Hi, everybody. I think I am live right now. I'm Shaneen Megji, and welcome to my channel called Toxicity is Not Your Destiny. Now, this video is a little bit different because I'm actually here live chatting with you all, and this is actually the first time I'm doing a Q&A live. So, yeah, here we are. I think, there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of people that are looking for answers, looking for guidance. And I thought, why not do a Q&A live? So many of you actually sent me questions. You submitted questions in advance, and I'm actually quite overwhelmed by the response. There are quite a number of questions. I definitely won't get through all of them today in this video, but this definitely is indicating that I should do several videos like this to answer your questions, and we'll just see how this goes. If you guys find this helpful, I would definitely love your feedback, because I really want to do, I want to create content that is relevant for you, and obviously do it in a way that's easy for you to consume. So I'm sort of just trying out different things. So here's a live Q&A. For those of you that are watching right now, I did include a link in the description box. If you want to ask me a question, you could submit it there, but I won't be able to do it on this live because I'm taking on questions that were given to me in advance. But certainly if you submit a question, there's a good chance I may answer it. Well, it depends on the question, if it's helpful for everybody, but there's a chance that I will answer it on another Q&A, or perhaps create an entire video just on your question, or and put out a blog on it. So definitely submit your questions, because if you have a question, chances are there are many, many others who have a question, the same question, and would really benefit from hearing the answer. So I brought my coffee just to get comfortable being live. So how this is going to flow, I'm going to actually just go through each of your questions one at a time. I'm thinking maybe to be on here for the next 30, 45 minutes. We'll just see how it goes. And I also just want to mention that my answers to your questions really represent my own personal insights. They don't replace any professional advice that you could get from a therapist or a counselor for your specific situation, since those people, if you're working with anyone like that, they would obviously know a lot more about your situation. They would know a lot more about your background and context. And obviously the topic we're discussing today on navigating narcissistic relationships is quite complex, and there's no cookie cutter answer that fits everybody. So with all that being said, let's just jump into the Q&A. So question number one: how do you start the healing process when you're not in a position to leave? What are the first steps to take? So, wow, that's tricky. That's a really tricky thing to go through healing while you're not in a position to leave, because I consider being in a relationship with a narcissist like living in a war zone. And of course, it depends how much proximity and contact you have with that narcissist or narcissistic person. But if you're living with them, if they're your spouse or a family member that you live with, then obviously it can be more of a battleground that you are living in. So it's not always easy. It's kind of like asking, how do you heal when you live in a war zone? So, but it's a great question. And there are things you can do. There are things. So this was not to discourage you, but just for me to appreciate that it's a challenging situation. So I'm not sure what kind of relationship it is, but nonetheless, the narcissists, most narcissists all tend to use the same playbook. And one of the big things that narcissists do is they want to be central to your world. They try to make themselves central, and they are looking to often make you an extension of them. Or they try to conform you into the image of who they want you to be, rather than who God has destined you to be. And all these things can make it quite complicated. So what I would suggest, obviously, you want to bring God into the picture, and because Jesus Christ is the healer, and the Bible says that by his stripes we are healed. So I would definitely start engaging in prayer and talking to God about what is going on, and engaging him in your healing process. That is number one for sure, because he can do miracles, and he can certainly give you grace when things are super challenging and difficult. I've known God to be able to, he's enabled me to be like Teflon in some situations where, you know, things just don't stick to you. And so that's a big thing, is to ask God for his help in this. On a practical level, I would recommend getting in touch with your values. What are the things that you hate? What are the deal breakers? And you know, just understanding what is important to you and what you won't tolerate or what you will tolerate. One of the big things, as I mentioned before, narcissists try to make themselves central to your world. And it's a lot like, you know, if you have, let's say, a spouse, or you're a child of a narcissistic parent, your life may feel a lot like you're on a one-legged stool, and that one leg is the narcissist in your life. And that's a very difficult way to live, is to be sitting on that one-legged stool. And so a big part of healing is actually to start working at creating other legs on that stool. So part of the healing process for you is just getting stronger while you're in the midst of that relationship. And one of the things, and this is something I counsel my clients to do, is cultivate those other legs. So other legs could be other relationships outside of your relationship with the narcissist. Now, if you have been isolated because the narcissist has been so central, I would recommend that you start to cultivate relationships outside of your relationship with the narcissist, and maybe reignite relationships that have been lost, perhaps reignite relationships with old friends. And it's really important to keep these relationships separate, completely separate from your relationship with the narcissist, so that you can strengthen yourself. You can have a support system outside of your relationship with the narcissist, and it starts to create some balance on that one-legged stool. You're starting to add another leg. The other big thing, you know, being in a relationship with a narcissist, there's a war on reality. The narcissist is constantly trying to impose their reality on you, and they do it to such a degree that they do it in a way to get you to doubt your own judgments, your own perceptions, your own ability to discern things. So because of that, you know, and if you're dealing with a narcissist that is very confident, very arrogant, they're intelligent on top of it all, then these kinds of things can throw you into confusion. And so it's really important to also have a person outside of your relationship, maybe even outside of your community and circle, that's wise, that is godly, and that you can process with. And they can also help keep you grounded in reality, because it's helpful to have other people's perspectives, especially when you're being gaslit so much. And sometimes when you are just talking to people in that same community where the narcissist is, there can be this thing called groupthink, where everybody starts to think the same and everybody has all the same blind spots. So you definitely want to find somebody that's out of that circle that can help you see things that's a different perspective from everybody else in that circle. Another really powerful thing to do, and this has been so helpful for me, is journaling. Journaling is so powerful. There's something really powerful about processing on paper. And it's really, when you process on paper, it forces you to take your thoughts and write them out to their final conclusion. And it also really helps you to get clarity. I find that, you know, sometimes processing and writing things down, it really creates a door for God to come in and the Holy Spirit to bring insights and reveal things to you even as you're writing. So I would encourage the journaling, the cultivating other relationships, finding a third person. Now, this doesn't have to necessarily be a friend. You could even find a coach or a counselor, or just someone who's wise and who has that gift of counsel and wisdom to be able to process with you. And another huge thing for healing is to meditate on God's word, on what he says about you. I would encourage you, maybe you could Google online and find scripture verses about God's love for you, about your identity in Christ, and meditate on those verses, because that will really help you to strengthen your identity in the face of someone that is constantly devaluing you and criticizing you. So that's a big one, strengthening your identity in the Lord. So I hope that this is, I hope that people are getting this. Okay, I just want to make sure that I'm actually live. It looks like I am live. Sometimes you never know with technical issues. All right, so I'm going to move on to the second question. I keep hearing the narcissist has low self-control and anger outbursts. Is it possible to have a narcissist in your life who does not have these two traits? I'm concerned that I may soon meet this side of him. I can deal with what I have come to know, but this concerns me. Back in the day, maybe 35 years ago, he would assault others, never me, even though it was I who upset him. But he hasn't done that in many, many years. I guess I avoided upsetting him, or he does have self-control. So this is a really interesting scenario. Well, here's the deal. Here's the deal with narcissists. The underlying emotions of narcissists are anger, hatred, and envy. They do not have much of a repertoire of emotions, hardly any emotions, and whatever they do have are generally negative emotions. So they tend to feel negative most of the time, whether you see it or not. It's really the emotions that are brewing just beneath the surface. And so you do have some narcissists that are overt and others that are more covert. Now, the overt narcissists are more out there. They're displaying their narcissistic traits, and that can be a big turnoff. The overt ones tend not to have as much self-control. Now, the covert ones are a completely different story. They have a bit more emotional intelligence and therefore more self-control. And so they have all the same narcissistic traits as the overt ones. They may have them just as bad, even worse. But the thing is that they drive all their traits underground. So they keep it concealed and camouflaged. So and these types of narcissists really thrive on their image. That is a huge, huge deal to them, probably more than the overt narcissist, because a covert is so meticulous and intentional about how they present themselves in any given situation. The crazy thing about covert narcissists is that they spend more of their inner energy managing their image rather than actually working on themselves to improve and become better people. So in terms of the woman here, or man, I can't tell what gender, but this is likely a covert narcissist that you are married to. And the thing about a covert narcissist is that they're very, they know exactly when to turn on the charm and when to drop the mask. A covert narcissist would be the type of narcissist that would, perhaps if they are in ministry, they might be up there on the stage and presenting the most touching message, or saying the most touching thing, and could then get in the car and start abusing their wife and kids, and their mask comes down. So that's kind of what a covert narcissist does. Now, it's interesting that with this person who wrote that, that the narcissist did not, you know what, it's a him, so it's a woman. Sorry. Yeah, so it's her husband. So her husband never lashed out at her in anger. And I'm thinking, I don't know a whole lot, except there's probably a few reasons why the husband would not lash out in anger. And it could be that you are a source of narcissistic supply, primary narcissistic supply for the husband. And so if he's very concerned about his image, then he would not, it's possible he does not want to be perceived as someone who is abusive. And maybe in his mind, he perceives abuse as physical violence. But but abuse is a lot more than physical violence. So it's possible that in order to keep his image as the perfect husband or a good husband or a family man, that he doesn't physically abuse you, but he takes out his anger in other ways with other people. And the other reality is a narcissist needs a scapegoat. So if he's not going to lash out at you, then he will find other people to blame and to take out his anger on. And this could just be because there are big risks if he were to take it out on you, even though you were the one who upset him. Like I said, image is such a huge thing for covert narcissists. So there might be something there. There might be him not wanting to lose his supply with you if he were to start being violent with you. The other thing is he might fear abandonment. So he may worry that if he physically beats on you, that this could lead to a breakup or a divorce or ruin his reputation. So those are probably some reasons without knowing the full story. Now, all that being said, the absence of physical violence doesn't necessarily mean that there's an absence of emotional or psychological manipulation or control. So I wonder if the narcissist, even though he is not physically violent with you, if he is still abusing you in other covert ways like gaslighting or manipulation or emotional abuse or financial abuse, or, just the whole cycle of narcissistic abuse where there is devaluing, being criticized, being put down, being shamed and humiliated. And all of these things can be just as harmful, if not more, than physical violence. And we know even from the scriptures, the imagery in Proverbs. Proverbs talks about, words having the power of life and death. And so words of a person can kill a person's spirit, or the effects of criticisms and verbal abuse is just like being stabbed with a sword. And it's amazing how the Bible uses these metaphors, and science is only now catching up with this. There is scientific evidence. I'll have to figure out where to find it, but this is something I heard, that the same pain receptors that are activated during emotional abuse and verbal abuse are the same ones that are activated when you're being physically hurt. So there's something really powerful that our bodies react the same way to violent words as the pain receptors do as being physically stabbed or hurt. So science is showing that emotional abuse is just as damaging as physical. And I think it could be even more because of how the gaslighting does all this crazy making stuff in a person's mind. So let's move on to the next question. Can a narcissist flip between being covert and overt? The simple answer is yes, they can. Covert and overt narcissists are like two sides of the same coin. So they can flip and flop between the two. And usually what can cause a covert to turn overt or the reverse could be times of stress or crisis. So it could be that as a coping mechanism, they revert to the opposite, to the other side, they flip. And probably a covert might become more overt during times of stress or crisis, or when they feel that people are catching on to their true nature. And so if they're realizing that their covert ways are not getting them the results they want, they might start to lash out in more overt ways. So it's all part of the same thing. Sometimes a change in life circumstances can cause them to switch back and forth, or if they feel threatened or competitive. So yes. So it's important to understand, though, that even while these triggers can happen and cause them to switch, it doesn't justify or excuse them to continue in their narcissism. And, regardless of if they're overt or covert, setting boundaries is really, really important when it comes to interacting with narcissists, and also getting a system of support outside of that relationship, as I mentioned earlier. So let's see here. Here's a question. How can I help my daughter to see what her father is doing? He is manipulating her to become his supply. So I wonder how many, I bet a lot of people a lot of people are struggling and dealing with this kind of issue here. So I'm just going to take a sip of water. So what can you do when you find yourself in that situation? So we don't know the age of the daughter in this question. So a lot of how you would respond would really depend on the age of the child. So when it comes to dealing with minor children, it would be important to discuss this more with your lawyer or with a counselor that is aware or has a specialization in narcissistic abuse and narcissistic personality disorder. So you'd want to check that out because there are definitely legalities involved with that. But let's just say that you have a daughter who is an adult. And so there are different ways that you could deal with it, even if they're an adult. You might have a daughter who's a pleaser. And if that's the case, she may not want to see it or hear about it. And that's where you really need to discern. So I would even say to start, you want to pray. You want to really engage God and ask for wisdom. And the Bible tells us that we can ask for wisdom generously, and God will give it to us without penalizing it for not having it in the first place. So definitely you want to have that wisdom because it really depends on where your child is at, what their personality is at like, and what the relationship with the father is like with that child. So if you have a pleaser, it may be very difficult to relay that message if they're not really open. But if you have a child who is a truth seeker, then you could say something like, here are the dynamics I have been perceiving that are happening with your dad concerning you, and they're concerning me. I don't know if you're open to chatting or if you'd like to chat, but I would be happy to talk with you about what I'm noticing if you would like. And this really helps to, give freedom to your daughter to decide if she wants to know the truth or not. And this is really, really important because when you do this, you're really showing a respect for their agency. And also you're walking in the opposite of what your husband has been walking in, or the father. So if their father has been so controlling and manipulative, the daughter has probably been used to having someone controlling and trying to tell her what to do. But your approach to give her freedom to hear about it is a real showing that she has agency and she can think for herself. So that's one of the things you can really say, you're your own agent, it's your decision, but I have some information that would be helpful for you. And it might even be helpful for you to do a little bit of research, maybe to have a video or an article or some kind of resource that you can share with your daughter that may explain it really well, because there is something about the credibility of third-party resources. And this was something that helped me to broach the issue with people that may not have been open to hear this kind of information about someone they cared about. But if you could find something that describes what she's been going through, then she could really resonate with it. And then you could offer to process it with her afterwards. So, you could share that. Here's an article, it sums it up really well. And as unfortunate as this is, I really think your father is grooming you, and this is how I'm seeing it unfold in your life. And you can give some examples and you can point out things and then offer for them to watch the other resources. So it's not just about you, but there is stuff out there. So I hope that's helpful. I think really giving them that freedom to choose if they want to hear it is a really big thing, because if you try to convince them or try to make the daughter see and she's not open, then it could cause resentment. It could cause her to drift from you more towards her father. So you really want to deal with it delicately and and just in a way that helps her to feel like she can choose. And this may not be easy. This may not be easy at all. It really, really takes a deep trusting in the Lord. I would say that, part of part of that process could just even be to take some time to entrust your daughter into the Lord's hands and to trust her future, to pray for her, and to trust that he has her back and he will look after her and take care of things for her, even if she's not open in that moment to hear. But that would be a lot better for you to take it to prayer and influence that way than to try to convince her of something if she's not open. And so, yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with just trusting that God has a plan and a purpose for your daughter, and that you don't need to try to force anything to happen or manipulate something to happen. But you could just allow God to work things out, but do everything you can, as I mentioned. So I hope that's helpful. Next question. Why do I feel very indecisive and emotional making decisions, like moving away from the covert narcissist? So my answer to this question, I'm assuming that you have not put distance between you and the narcissist. Or maybe you put some distance, but maybe you're debating about the next step to put even more distance and move away. So you mentioned one thing, you feel indecisive and emotional making decisions. So I would say one of the big things with narcissistic relationships is that we can get trauma bonded with them, and it's a real thing. It's like a chemical addiction in some ways that we can go through a withdrawal process when there's distance or when things are not well. And I have a whole video that talks about trauma bonding and what it is and all that. So I will make a note to put it in the description box. But I do encourage you to watch my video on trauma bonding, because I think that could be playing into this, the emotional feelings that you're having. And also soul ties. There could be some ungodly soul ties, especially if the covert narcissist took up a big space in your life. It's possible that there might have been some ungodly soul tie there. And if they're still kind of in the back of your head and you find it difficult to make any decisions because you're still hearing their voice and you feel like they're with you even when they're not, all of these things can be indicative of a soul tie. So that's a huge, huge step to even just break the soul ties and to be breaking the trauma bonds. And I would just encourage you to watch those videos just to get more of the steps on how to tackle those. The other thing about being in a relationship with a covert narcissist is that your identity, your decision-making process, who you are, have been undermined for so long, for so many years. And it's a lot like if those things could be muscles, your decision-making capacity, your identity, consider that all of these things are like muscles. And when they're being undermined for so long, it's like they atrophy. It's like they're in a cast for so long. And if you can just imagine, if you haven't moved a muscle for years, imagine if you were sitting in a wheelchair and suddenly you were able to walk. Well, you're not going to be able to jump off that wheelchair and start walking or running right away if you've been sitting in it for years and years, because those muscles have atrophied. And so you'd probably need to be exercising those muscles in order to develop them. And so that's a lot like decision-making and our identity. And so what I would suggest, because is really leaving a narcissist, moving away from them, that is a huge decision. And it's kind of like when you haven't been making decisions for a long time because they've been undermined, then that could feel like a very daunting thing. And so what I would suggest is to start to do little things to work up to making that decision. What are some things that you do have control over that you can start making decisions about? Like, what are you eating? What do you eat in the morning, or what about making a decision to go and talk to a friend or go see someone, or go away for a date with just you and go away for the day and make that decision, or make a decision to buy something for yourself, or order something different from the menu. If someone has made decisions for you, maybe there's some decision-making power for smaller things that you can take back and just begin practicing that and get comfortable making those decisions, because I promise you, as you do these things, it'll become easier then to start making the bigger decisions. So I hope that's helpful. It's kind of like training to run a marathon a little bit. You just gotta start small and then work your way up like it's a muscle. And also break the soul ties and work through the trauma bond. Those are all really, really big things. I think too, prayer, and I keep saying this for every single question, but prayer is such a huge thing, engaging God, because so much of what's happening is spiritual, and there are spiritual realities and spiritual dimensions to all of this. And we have access to God's power. We have access to his angels. We have access to the Holy Spirit. And every time you pray, it sets things in motion spiritually. So definitely ask the Lord to help you as well, to ask him what his plans are for your life, what direction he has for you. And it might just be that he will lead you to make little decisions, and he's holding your hand. And you can go in a direction, and he will lead you in that direction. So I hope that helps. All right. So what time is it? It's about 12:30. Maybe what I'll do is answer. So I'll answer one more question. How do we deal with family betrayal after being in a tight-knit community? The betrayers act as if they did no wrong. I'm being love bombed with gifts, and I don't want to get into constant conflicts with the betrayers in my family. Wow, that's tough. That is really tough. Especially, you mentioned being in a tight-knit family. So that's even more huge, to have a betrayal in a family that was so close. And now you have the betrayer who acts like they did nothing wrong, and you're being love bombed. So, gosh. So there's layers and degrees of how you could deal with this, depending on how toxic things were, how close you were with the family, obviously how serious the betrayal was. Yeah, that is not an easy thing. That for sure. That's a heartbreak. And the beautiful thing is that God is near to the brokenhearted. So I just want you to know that God is especially near to people with broken hearts. And I can only imagine what that must feel like, because when a betrayal happens with a narcissist, it generally affects so many other relationships. And I can only imagine that you are not just losing that relationship with the betrayer, but other family members that may have sided with the betrayer, may believe their story. And it can be so painful, because it's when you start to see what's in people's hearts that you may not have seen before. And man, that's tough when it's your own family. So I think the first thing really for sure is to engage God, because God says he will never leave you nor forsake you, and God will never betray you. God always has your best interests at heart, and he's working for your good. And in some strange way, even though this is so painful, God does work these kinds of things for good. And so the first thing would be to ask God what to do. What is he telling you to do in this relationship? It doesn't say what kind of relationship this was. If you are a child of a parent, or if you're a parent, or you're an associate or a spouse, and it's not really clear what the kind of abuse or betrayal you went through. But obviously, all that you shared with me shows that you would need to set boundaries, and boundaries is a big thing. And guarding your heart is really key. There's a really powerful scripture in Proverbs 4:23 that says, above all else, guard your heart, for it is the wellspring of life. And it's really interesting. I don't know if you've ever noticed, but it says above all else, guard your heart, meaning that before we do anything else, before we steward anything else in our lives, any relationship, anything, we're actually called to steward our own hearts. And that is powerful. And that's what I would say you need to do in this situation, is guarding your heart, because your heart, it says, out of it flows the wellspring of life. So everything else flows from your own heart. So of course, depending on the seriousness or severity of the betrayal, it requires readjusting your relationship. It may require going no contact, depending on how serious. But the reality is, this person denies that they did anything wrong. They don't think they did anything wrong. So what that says right away is that they're not a safe person. Trust has been broken, and they don't see that there's anything to earn or build up again. They don't feel the need to repair that trust or make restitution or restore anything. And if they don't think they did anything wrong, then what stops them from doing the same thing again to you? So that means protecting yourself. And it might mean no contact or limited contact. Only you can answer that question. And this can be complicated because, if there are family gatherings or things, and that betrayer is going to be there, what do you do? And so I think it would be really important to decide what kind of boundaries you want to set. And maybe it looks like you choosing who you'll stay in relationship with in your family and cultivate those relationships one-on-one, the ones that are safe and the ones that you trust. And it may mean skipping out on family gatherings and interactions altogether, because it could be that serious that you can't even go to anything like that. Or it could be that maybe you can, and you have certain boundaries that you don't, of how you interact with the person that betrayed you while you're still keeping relationships with other people. Because, sadly, this kind of thing affects an entire community and affects a whole group of people. And it's difficult to navigate in those messy and the muddy waters. And especially if people are siding with the betrayer. If that's the case, you may just need to put distance with everybody. And that can be really difficult. But I have seen God work in people's hearts in time. And while it may be very painful to have to put boundaries and put distance between you and people you love, and feel the betrayal, not just from the one person, but maybe many people who believe them and not you, it could be that it's a season. And because the reality is that truth has a way of coming to the surface and showing itself, and it may not happen right away. And it may not be worth trying to explain yourself or get people to understand you if they are, if they have some interest. There might be a cost for them to follow the truth or to know the truth. It might result in a loss for them in some way, and that could mean them siding with the abuser. There's all kinds of reasons why sometimes people just don't want to hear the truth or know the truth. And but it could be that in time some of them will, because the reality is that the narcissist, their colors leak out. They can't help themselves. And if you're out of the picture, then it's possible that more of their colors will leak out onto the others that are still left and interacting with them, and they will see things for how they are. And God may restore some relationships back to you. So I just want to encourage you to trust the Lord with your life and your heart, and trust the Lord with loneliness and aloneness, because you're not alone. And God has a way of filling up the vacuum with good things. And it might feel like such a big empty thing to not have the people that, your family. But the thing about, I think of a story in the Bible actually where Jesus, I think he was healing, and he might have been healing, and there was crowds in front of him, and his mother and siblings were wanting to come see him, but they couldn't get through the crowd. And so someone spoke up to him and said, "Jesus, your mother and siblings want to see you." And he said, "Well, who is my mother and siblings? Those who do the will of God are my mother and father and brother and sister." And that's sort of a paraphrase of that verse. but it just really speaks about who family really is. And it really is about those people that do love God, that are doing God's will, that are not sinning blatantly and choosing to go on a path of violence and destruction and toxicity and, chronically living that way. I mean, so yeah, so sometimes God might have us separate from our families, and it's not, of course, that we want to separate. I think ideally we want to do everything we can to be at peace with each other, to be at peace with our family members, to reconcile if we can. But there are some situations where that just isn't possible. And even Jesus said it. He said, I didn't come to bring peace to the world. I came to bring a sword. I came to turn father against mother and brother-in-law, father-in-law against daughter-in-law. This is a paraphrase again, but a man's enemies will be the members of his own household. And that's very sobering. So sometimes that happens because you have people that are choosing, have very, very different values, and there's broken trust. And so yeah, I feel for you. I feel for you going through this. But I really do believe that as you trust the Lord and, take this time to get closer to him, he will fill the empty places with good things. And I would just trust that he can do that for you, and he can work things out for good in your life. So yes. So this was really good. I really enjoy answering your questions. All of you have asked really good questions, tough questions, complex ones, but really good questions that need to be asked. And I hope that our time was helpful for all of you tuning in, and for those of you that weren't live but will tune in later. I do hope that this was helpful, and I'd love to know if you'd like me to do more of these kinds of videos. So let me know in the comment section, and I will probably do another one because so many questions came in and I would love to answer more of them. So stay tuned for the next Q&A, and that is it. So bye for now, everyone. Have a blessed day, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye.